All right, and welcome everybody to Buzz Live. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Buzz Live, for you, those of you who don't know, is the talk show that I humbly refer to as the Tonight Show for nonprofits. Now, of course, it is not night, but a gorgeous Sunday afternoon here in Rocky Mount, Virginia. Now, we have held Buzz Live shows in a basement, in a music hall, in a historic theater in Roanoke, and just yesterday we were at the Habitat for Humanity Restore in Christiansburg, Virginia. Now, this is the very first time that we have been in a church sanctuary, and I got to say this. Yeah. I got to say this feels kind of nice. All right, a lot of power up here. I can understand why people want to become preachers. Now, my name is Michael Hemphill. I'm the creator and host of the TV show Buzz that airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on Blue Ridge PBS, where we feature the great work that nonprofit organizations do in the communities that they serve. And one of these great nonprofits that we have had the privilege to walk alongside here in 2025 is the Franklin County NAACP. Yeah, that deserves an amen. That's right. Now, the Franklin County NAACP has created a program, as you all know, called Raising the Shade, to shed light on a previously unknown chapter of the county's history. The fact that 70 brave black men, against incredible odds, somehow ended up fighting for the Union during the Civil War with the United States colored troops to help gain freedom for their brothers and sisters who were enslaved. Earlier this year, we were in this space, First Baptist Church in Rocky Mount, to premiere our first episode of our show, Buzz, featuring Raising the Shade. And you can watch our entire episode on our YouTube channel at Buzz for Good. Now, today we are back here to hopefully inspire those of you who are gathered here, those of you who are tuning into our live stream on Facebook and YouTube, and those of you who may be watching the show later in May on Blue Ridge PBS. We want to inspire you to attend a forum that Raising the Shade is hosting on May the 31st at the Smith Mountain Lake 4-H Center. I've got that right so far, yes? Okay. They have invited distinguished scholars from all over the country to come and share more about the African American experience during the Civil War and beyond. This event is free and open to all, and you can find out more information about that at raisingtheshade.org. Now, on today's Buzz Live, I will have conversations with the Raising the Shade Education Committee Chairman, Raymond Williams, as well as committee member and pastor of this church, Reverend Christopher Coates. Hopefully I'm doing him justice up here right now. I will also share with you some video recordings that I've had with interviews over the last couple of weeks with the various presenters who will be at the forum on May 31st. And having spoken with them already, I can assure you that we all are in for a treat that day. Now, just to set the scene for today's show, let's begin with the introduction to our Buzz episode that aired earlier this year, again, which is available on our YouTube channel, and I would hope everyone would be inspired to go watch it. Rob, if we could show that first clip.
Monuments are all around us. Testaments to people and places of the past. Today's Buzz begins with just such a monument, located on the courthouse lawn in Franklin County, Virginia, honoring the county's ancestors who fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. It's a common monument in the South, but increasingly people are asking, why? Why is it there? What is its origin story? Who and what is it honoring? And who and what is it not? These are the questions being posed by members of the nonprofit Franklin County NAACP. With funding they've received from the Mellon Foundation as part of a Virginia Tech-led initiative titled Monuments Across Appalachian Virginia, the Franklin County NAACP has created a project called Raising the Shade. Their mission? Create new monuments that celebrate the county's 70 African American ancestors who fought for the Union during the Civil War in a branch of the Army known as the United States Colored Troops. But their quest, like the one their ancestors faced 160 years ago, has been fraught with struggle as they're confronting the truth epitomized by the great William Faulkner. All of us labor in webs spun long before we were born. The past is never dead. It's not even past. Buzz will continue following the Franklin County NAACP through 2025. In May, the Monuments Across Appalachian Virginia grant from Virginia Tech will fund a community-wide forum to share a more complete story about Franklin County during the Civil War. And by the end of the year, the group plans to erect a new statue honoring its ancestors who fought for the Union in the United States Colored Troops.
All right, if you would please join me in welcoming to the stage here the Raising the Shade Education Committee Chairman, Raymond Williams. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now, before we get started with the work of the committee's doing with the forum, start off with what inspired you just to even become part of this effort to begin with?
Okay. I've always been interested in history. I was particularly interested in Civil War history. And as I got a little older, though, it fascinated me, the history I did not know. And particularly Civil War history, because I grew up in a time period where we were taught officially in Virginia a really lousy history.
Yeah.
I mean, it was lousy. And I still remember in high school.
We covered some of that in that first
yes,
episode.
You did. And we'll probably talk, and we've been talking about that with school groups, et cetera. But I remember I was talking with a friend in high school. She was black, and we were talking about, and I repeated what I had learned in history class in 7th grade. It was about states' rights, not slavery. She said, for me it was, and I thought, I cannot argue with that. Mm-hmm. And we were good friends. It was a pleasant exchange. But I thought, that's a good point. Yeah. And even in college, although I learned more about the realities and so forth, even there in one class, for example, I remember we read a book by Henry Kidd Douglas, who was a minor officer with Stonewall Jackson. But, for example, I never read anything by Frederick Douglass. As I got older, I thought, wait a minute, that
you got the wrong Douglas.
Yeah, right. There needs to be more. There are a lot of stories that have not been told. So when I was asked to participate, I thought this is a good opportunity to make those stories more well known, because they should be. And there's some incredibly inspiring stories. There are also some sad and depressing stories, and that's true of American history, and we have to acknowledge both so we can move forward to reach our ideals. And we keep emphasizing that. We really do want to keep people focused on what do we need to do to get to where we want to be.
That's right. That's right. Yep. We about 3 or 4 years ago, we did an episode of Buzz on the Christiansburg Institute, which I'm sure people here are familiar with. It was one of the very first African-American schools founded in 1866, a year after the Civil War ended, for newly freed slaves. And it was a model of education, shouldn't have been not only just for black Americans, but for all Americans, until school integration finally took hold in 1966. And what happened as a result of desegregation is that the Christiansburg Institute was closed. And all of the students there were scattered to previously, whites-only schools, rather than the other way around. And a lot of the alumni there would make that point. It's like, we had the better school, but we were the ones who were shut down. And similar to like this history, I'm reminded of, all the talk right now about DEI and all this nonsense. When we're talking about the history that should be presented, it should be African-American history. That is all of our history. If we're going to get rid of one history, let's get rid of the history that we used to always learn and not the other, because this is the one, right?
Right.
So what is your, have you noticed, being part of Raising the Shade, have you noticed any change in attitudes regarding, the history that you're trying to present here?
That's difficult to say, and that obviously, we haven't met with everyone yet, and there's some people who are dealing.
Attitudes regarding, the history that you're trying to present here?
That's difficult to say, and that obviously, we haven't met with people who are dealing with community engagement more, and they would probably be able to address that more because they're actually. I have noticed, though, there is an interest, and particularly when we met with younger people, it's like this is fascinating. And I know people on the committee, there's been some change because we're learning things we didn't know. And that is one of our goals. We hope to see some changes in attitudes as we learn. And we're not just stopping with May 31st. We do want to continue the educational process as well.
Yeah, we're about to meet all the presenters through these video interviews I did. But how do you hope people are changed by those who attend the event?
Right. I think the big thing, first of all, just to be aware of the complexity of this history. We tend to simplify things as time goes on, and people fall prey to the good old days myth when everything worked. And someone had said, why are we putting up a statue for them? They fought for the North. And I thought, no, they didn't fight for the North. They thought for a vision of the United States for all.
Nice.
And
yeah.
And there were people living in the South who agreed with that vision, who were opposed to slavery, who were pro-union, and a lot of them lived in the Franklin County, Floyd area, and some were adamantly and actually rebelled and fought for the Union or refused to fight for the Confederacy, who agreed with that vision, who were opposed to slavery, who were pro-union, and a lot of them lived in the Franklin County, Floyd area, and some were adamantly and actually rebelled and fought for the Union or refused to fight for the Confederate. And even then, of course, that even within the United States Army at the time, there was racism, and USCT soldiers had to fight that as well, that are not over. We're still dealing with the legacy. Right. So I hope people will be aware of that. As a kid, I read a verse in the Bible, second and third and fourth generations. I thought, well, that's not fair. But as I got older, I realized, it takes a while for attitudes to change, and things that are wrong, it takes a while to change those. And when you do things that aren't right, that legacy can span several generations. So I hope people will realize that. The other thing, because we're going to hear from the college professors and professionals who will be presenting, they're great, but I hope people will also be aware. We have some local people who've done a lot of research, college students, and they've learned a lot about our local soldiers, the men born in Franklin County, that was not known and is getting some attention, including a researcher at Harvard is interested in what we're doing. And they will be there to talk as well, so I hope people realize they can come and learn more about these local soldiers as well as national experts.
Wonderful. Well, let's take a moment. Thank you for being here.
Thank
Let's
you.
take a moment to meet some of the presenters who will be there at the May 31st event. We're going to start with...
Thank you for having me. So my name is Kira Mosley Hobbs. Probably a lot of your viewers in Southwest Virginia in the area have seen me around before. I am the founder and executive director of the More Than a Fraction Foundation. We are a nonprofit foundation made up of descendants of the Smithfield Plantation, which is in Montgomery County, Blacksburg, Virginia.
What does more than a fraction mean?
Well, our family name, one of our first ancestors, shortly after arriving from the coast of West Africa, he shows up on the inventory list of the Preston family with the last name Fraction. And we don't know where the last name came from. It was a reminder that he was not fully a person, if not a person at all. But it could also be, you know how language changes over time. So like, for example, with the new kids, no cap. 20 years ago, a cap was only one thing, and that was the thing you put on your head. So in the same context, language has changed over time. So we think that fraction might also have been a label of fractious, which meant likely to quarrel, likely to fight. So the name More Than a Fraction is a play on words. It's basically saying that we are more than our history, even though we love our history and we use our history because it builds who we are today. But it also means our work and our purpose is more than doing anything to the benefit of just our family. We want what we do to reach the masses and have a positive effect on as many people as possible.
Lovely. What is your message going to be at the forum on May 31st with Franklin County NAACP and Raising the Shade?
We're going to bring back the idea of community and storytelling. So what I'm working on during the Raising the Shade presentation that I'm going to do is I want to tell you a story. And I want to capture you in that. I don't want to just lecture to you because we all have a general idea of U.S. colored troops, the Civil War. But let me tell you a story of what it was like to be a U.S. colored troop and the family of a U.S. colored troop. And let's just have that experience together.
Yeah. All right. The next interview I was able to do is with Jonathan Landy, who is the Associate Professor of History at Purdue University and the author of Freedom Soldiers, The Emancipation of Black Soldiers in Civil War Camps, Courts, and Prisons. Let's take a look.
So on May 31st, I'll be discussing the content of my recent book, Freedom Soldiers, which is an exploration of USCT members from all across the country who joined up with the United States Colored Troops and served from late 1862 all the way up through the end of the war. And in particular, these soldiers were men who, in their struggle for freedom and for the Union, they actually found themselves with limitations on their freedom after having joined the Union Army. So my project looks at their struggle to continue to develop American ideals of freedom as they desert the Union Army, but which I show as formerly enslaved men, they're actually pushing back against limitations within the Union Army to expand notions of freedom by leaving the Army just as they would of slavery. And then they do so as well in the military justice system by advocating for themselves. And then once some of them go to prison, once they're in prison, writing letters to Secretary of the War, Edwin Stanton, and President Abraham Lincoln seeking more freedom. One of the soldiers that actually brought me to an interest in the USCT deserters was a man named John Mitchell, who served in the 52nd United States Colored Infantry. And he was from a plantation in Mississippi. I believe it was Washington, Mississippi. And he made his way, once Grant had moved down the Mississippi River and captured Vicksburg, he made his way to the Vicksburg, the camps that had surrounded the city, and he enlisted in the 52nd, and he found that he was being kicked and cuffed by an officer. One of the USCT officers was mistreating him. So John Mitchell runs away. He runs away. He gets work on a steamship that's going up and down the Mississippi River. And he is captured later on and tried before the courts martial. And while he's in the courts martial, he says that I had been kicked and cuffed. I requested to be removed from the regiment. They did not provide this. So I left. And this is a case, John Mitchell's is a case that happens throughout the Union. There are Black Virginians who would have come from the region near Raising the Shade's upcoming monument, and they also deserted. Some of them would return home for short breaks and then return back to the Union Army. And so my research shows that these soldiers are fighting for freedom, not only against Confederates, not only against their former enslavers, but also within the Army, struggling to make freedom more meaningful to themselves.
Now, on Buzz Live, we always like to have a musical guest, for those of you who have seen our show before. Well, for today's show, we have a theatrical guest, Mike Wiley, who is an acclaimed actor and playwright who has spent nearly 2 decades fulfilling his mission to bring educational theater to young audiences and communities across the country. Through his performances, Wiley has introduced countless students and communities to the legacies of Emmett Till, Jackie Robinson, the Freedom Riders, and more. I was fortunate enough to interview him and Duke University professor Charlie Thompson. Together, they have created a project called America's Hallowed Ground that seeks to honor sites of past struggles, conflicts, and sacrifices that are significant to American history, particularly its history of racial inequality. After our interview, I'm going to share with you a video of their latest collaboration, which will be shared at Raising the Shades Forum on May 31st.
I would say if you're ever wondering, or if you ever wondered how the troops, particularly the USCT troops, were recruited, and how information was disseminated to them, as well as other Union soldiers throughout the South, Abraham Galloway might be your answer. Abraham Galloway was an escaped slave turned Union spy who managed to infiltrate deep into the South, as far south as Mississippi, to learn as well as recruit soldiers from those regions of the country, as well as far north as Virginia and higher. Galloway was not only a freedom fighter, he also was a representative, because after his time as a Union spy, he then became North Carolina, or one of North Carolina's first state Black senators, or Black state senators. There are accounts of him meeting with Abraham Lincoln and going toe-to-toe with him, telling him, arguing with him, telling him that if Black soldiers are to fight, if they are to fight for the Union Army, that then they would need and want and have to have full citizenship for the price of their blood and their lives.
Mm, mm. And so on May 31st, you will be reenacting him.
Absolutely. I will portray Abraham Galloway with all of the research that has been done, as well as actual words that Galloway has had spoken. And I will be interviewed by my colleague and co-director of the America's Hallowed Ground Project, Charlie Thompson.
Lift every voice and sing.
1816 is the year I was born, on a farm in Louisa County, Virginia. And, well, 1849 was the year I was reborn from a box in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But atwixt those two bookends of time, oh, cousin, lay 1,000 novels of anguish, pages of time and toil, of true events, marking the agony of millions of people enslaved right here in the land of the free.
Till earth and heaven ring.
We put distance between us, but not enough. And just as we were going into the thicket of a swamp, a bullet tore through Isaac's shoulder. It made a hell of a mess. But still, he ran on. We ran on. Until we could no longer hear the dogs. But by morning, they had found us. I will not leave you, Isaac. I'm gonna stay here, and we'll finish this together. Isaac grabbed me, pulled me close. Where I'm going, ain't no slavery. Just mansions and streets paved with gold and a place for me. Get your ass from around here, Abraham. Run.
And our final video guest is Christopher Hamner, Associate Professor of History and Art History at George Mason University. And he is actually going to have two presentations at the Raising the Shade Forum on May 31st, which he describes here.
I am a scholar of war and society, so I look at military history, war, the planning for war, and the peace process from a variety of different angles. At George Mason, I teach classes at the undergraduate and graduate levels on various conflicts from the Civil War to the Second World War, and I also teach classes in civil military relations and the War in American Society survey. And I was delighted when Raising the Shade reached out to me, I think late last year, and invited me to come up and be part of this marvelous symposium. And I'm really excited to be there, both to talk to the audience and also to hear some of these other amazing scholars that are going to be participating.
Fabulous. So what are you specifically bringing to this conversation?
I am going to be delivering two lectures. One is on just the experience of Civil War soldiers on the ground. So often when I speak in public, we get Civil War buffs who know a lot about the tactics and the fighting at Gettysburg or Fredericksburg,
Right.
but they haven't always thought about what it was like to be a 22, 23, 24-year-old young man from New Hampshire or Wisconsin or Virginia who's kind of thrown into the meat grinder of Civil War combat. So we're going to look at the sort of daily life of Civil War soldiers, North and South. And then I'll be giving a second lecture on Black servicemen and the franchise, the vote for Blacks, and the 1864 presidential election, which I think remains the most consequential presidential election in American history, and which pivots on
Present company, perhaps exclusive.
I think if you put it to a group of 100 historians, they would still say 1864 was the most consequential.
Okay.
With recent elections kind of moving up on that list.
Yeah.
But it turns on a few issues, but one of the most important is Black citizenship, Black service, and the Black franchise. The Emancipation Proclamation finally allowed the federal army to recruit Blacks into its ranks. There were canny members of the Black community, including men like Frederick Douglass, who understood that Black participation in the war itself was critical, not just to strike a blow against the institution of slavery, but also to cement the claim after the war that Blacks had earned full rights to citizenship in the United States once the war was settled. And, historically, there's never been a faster way to cement one's claim to citizenship than to serve in the armed forces, to risk a life, to lose a limb. So if you've ever been interested in exploring history, rolling up your sleeves and doing a little historical analysis yourself, this will be a great chance to do that.
All right. All right, so those are our presenters who will be at the May 31st Forum, hosted by Raising the Shade. More about that event at raisingtheshade.org. Now, please welcome to the stage our final guest for tonight, the Raising the Shade committee member, as well as pastor of First Baptist Church here, Reverend Christopher Coates. Yeah. Now, first of all, I've got to ask, you're probably not used to being out there. You're used to being up here. How did I do? It was so far so good.
You did.
It's okay. Okay. All right.
And you can take over next Sunday.
All right. If you need to sanitize this space, to get it ready for next week, I will not be offended. First of all, from my vantage, it's pretty easy to be cynical right now about where we are as a country in terms of having conversations about history. But I have been so inspired by just being a part of the work that y'all are doing here, Franklin County NAACP, Raising the Shade. So thank you for that how do you maintain hope and optimism and joy during this time?
So I guess for me, it's easy because it's going to sound bad, but I'm going to try to use a play on words. I'm the meaning of what it means to be a hope dealer.
Okay.
So that my business is to actually
Nice.
deal hope. So for me, it's easy. That's from the spiritual part. But from, I think, logistically, politically, socially, as an African American and just understanding our story, is that we have always had this ever abounding hope that things would get better. And so telling the story about the United States colored troops is just about a group of men, 70 from Franklin County, but nearly 200,000 across the country who believe that the sweat of their own brow, the sacrifice of their own life, the work of their own hands, the firing of their own gun would have something to do with there being better days. Frederick Douglass said it that the colored troop fighting was to be the first blow in him buying his humanity. That if he's man enough to fight, then he's man enough to walk down the street. He's man enough to own a business. He's man or woman enough for people to see the humanity in him. And so for me, the story, while some may politicize it, it occurred. We cannot erase history, even though there may be those who want to sanitize it. These are events that have occurred and that systemically have produced things that we still suffer to this day. So that's something that we cannot erase. And so for me, I get that it may be cynical, but the American Civil War is a part of American history, just as important as the American Revolution, just as important as any other aspect of our country's history. While it may not necessarily be the most glowing part to some, it is a chapter in our history. And there's this phrase, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Yep. And so it is my hope that America as a nation would learn from its history, therefore we do not have to go down this road again. So.
Wow. Wow. I mean, all that was just off the cuff. Imagine when he actually has time to write a sermon from up here. Man, y'all are a lucky people.
I don't know about all that.
Yeah. All right, so we're kind of coming to the end of our show here. I know you've also been focusing on, obviously, May 31st is an important event. Please, I hope everyone who's tuning in is going to go to that event and learn more about this incredible history, raisingtheshade.org. What do we have to look forward to after May 31st that the committee's doing?
So I think what we celebrate on May 31st it'll be an opportunity to inform ourselves, but also think we should leave with a challenge. That the stories in which we hear, the information that we learn on that day, they should not stay confined to a notebook of notes that we take or an experience to say that we went, but rather I think it should challenge us to literally not just learn about history, but go live it out. And the main theme, I think, of the story of hearing about the United States colored troops is we hear the story of resilience, right? And so when we hear this story that has this theme of resilience, this theme of overcoming odds, this theme of fighting through the powers that be, whether it be their wage inequality, whether it would be being put in certain situations on the front lines that were not conducive to victorious battle, or would it be just returning home and not being seen as a complete man? We see that these soldiers represented the theme of resilience. And so we'll learn about that on the 31st. My question is, what we'll do after? And my thing is that there will be days as we encounter in this America where we will need that very same resilience.
Amen.
As African Americans, as Americans overall, we need to understand that we do have a voice, we do have a part to play, And as I said here at church, everybody has a job and a responsibility, regardless of whether it's sweeping the floor or opening the door, waving a hand. Everybody has a job. And so I challenge all of us that after the celebration is over, what will we do? And from my point of view, we should take that information. It should inspire us. It should inform us. But we have a responsibility to ensure that it does not stop there, that we keep it on. So.
All right. Well, I can't think of a better way to end our show, so I'm going to leave it at that. I do have one more little clip from the end of our first episode that I would like to share with you one more time, because it's just a beautiful, I think, tribute to all the work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for everyone being part of tonight's event, and I hope to see you all May 31st at the Raising the Shade Forum at Smith Mountain Lake 4-H Center. Thank you so much.
I'm hoping that with the monument here, Raising the Shade in Franklin County, that it will literally raise the shade. It will open the door for people to engage in another set of dialogue that basically tells us more about this story, more how we as a diverse people in America fit into this narrative together, how we all contribute to the making of the country. And I think that basically one more public marker like this statue will add to that narrative and be able to open the door for us to have those kinds of discussions.
Perils that these African American soldiers faced on the battlefield, even just in that initial act, many of them managed to escape from enslavement in order to go and join up with the Union forces. So the bravery, the sacrifice, and really the commitment to American values and ideals, I think, is on such full display in the stories of these African American soldiers. If we're not going to commemorate these stories, then what is worth commemorating?